Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. This is Marta's Magical Mystery Class, and this is video number 8 in our series on drafting your first novel. If you have been subscribing to the channel or if you're just watching the channel regularly, it's on a 2-week schedule. So if you've been watching the videos about every 2 weeks, you may be as far as 35,000 words into your first novel, which is fantastic. Yay! Many congratulations. Many. For a lot of you, that's already past the halfway point. Even for those of you that are going to have longer first drafts, we are certainly closing in there. So, congratulations to all of you. We are certainly past halfway through the videos that will be on drafting. I'll be taking a little break after the drafting videos before we jump into the editing videos, but that's weeks off yet, so no worries there. Give everybody a chance to kind of catch up. So, yay! Congratulations and all that. Keep going, keep outlining, keep brainstorming, but don't stop to edit, okay? Keep moving forward at this point. Keep just putting words on paper and making them go. I am going to talk to you today about 2 elements of fiction, and then I've got a review of a new book. So, all kinds of fun. Elements of fiction today are related to the element of fiction I talked about in my last video. So in the previous Magical Mystery Class video, and actually in the sci-fi seminar video as well, I talked about point of view. I talked about narrating, sort of omniscient narration or limited omniscient narration versus first-person narration. We talked a little about escape rooms as second-person kind of point of view for mystery solving. Today, we are going to dig down and talk a little about voice and tone, because I think point of view, voice, and tone all get kind of mixed up together when we get to talking about things, and I think it can be useful to have a little clarity. I'm also going to add a little coda, little end piece to the point of view discussion, something I entirely forgot to mention in the last video that's worth talking about when we talk about point of view, and it has bearing on voice and tone. So when we talk about the voice of a story, we usually mean the voice of the narrator, whether that's an omniscient narrator of some kind or whether that's a first-person narrator, okay? So voice is involved in the whole length of the story. Voice is often deeply sunk into character, especially if we're talking about the point of view being first-person narration. The book is told to us in the I voice from one of the characters involved, okay? That voice is just even right in there with the I voice. Voice tends to be a more permanent feature of a work, and we tend to talk about voice as it relates to the narrator, to the character. Sometimes we talk about an author's voice, okay? Especially if we suspect the narrator and the author maybe are closely connected. All right, then we're really speaking about that authorial voice. Tone is another word that gets mixed in here, and tone does also sometimes get used to talk about the book as a whole, or maybe we speak about the tone of an author's voice. Tone gets used in a lot of mixy ways. Tone can be something that changes. Oh, I really felt like the tone of the book shifted. I thought it began in this place of real melancholy, and I thought it ended with some hope. Okay, so we can talk about a tonal shift in the book, where you wouldn't talk about a shift in the voice of the book. You know, you would maybe say like the character seemed more melancholy, and then the character or characters seemed to have more hope at the end. So tone is something that we talk about as more changeable than voice or than point of view. But we can also talk about the tone of the book as a whole. Oh, I thought the tone was very upbeat. Ooh, I thought the tone was really gritty. Okay? So that's a little... Tone is probably the least fixed of the three terms: point of view, voice, and tone. And yet, I think all three terms are useful when we're discussing a story. So this actually gets me to the little tail piece I said I would mention regarding point of view. We talked all about narrators and characters and first person and third person. We didn't talk about something that has bearing on all this, and that is whether or not you can trust your narrator. Some of my favorite books, some of the books that are the most fun, are the books where we're getting the story from somebody and it becomes increasingly clear we should really not trust the person we're getting the story from. And that's when I said there are people now building books with first-person narration from multiple points of view. That's something those authors are having a lot of fun playing with, because there's usually one voice among the cluster that's a little more sus than the other voices. One voice that just seems a little less reliable, and that's what we talk about: reliable versus unreliable narrators. And that has to do with voice and tone. The voice of a reliable narrator is a voice you trust. The voice of an unreliable narrator is a voice that seems to kind of be slipping a little. A voice that's really not giving us the whole story, or a voice that is overtly lying to us, which you may find out by looking at different artifacts, newspaper clippings, journal entries, whatnot, throughout the book. So do be aware that voice and tone can be used to, in a way that is almost external to your experience of the book. It's external to your experience of the story, maybe, or that something that affects your whole experience of the story. In that you may begin to get the feeling as you're reading something that you're not actually getting the whole story. Okay? That's a great trick if you can pull it off. I love unreliable narrators personally. Although, to be fair, that can be used, I'm grinning because it can often be used to comic effect. It can also be used to great tragic and dramatic effect as well. So be aware of those terms: point of view, voice, and tone, as different ways that we can talk about the way a book is put together. They're different elements of fiction. Tone in particular can shift, can be used to talk about individual scenes, or we can talk about tone as what we might call an emergent property. Tone as something that comes out of not just the point of view or the voice, but the tone of a book, the tone being very serious, the tone being utopic or dystopic, being something that comes out of not just point of view or voice, but something that's also driven by character, by setting, by plot, okay? If we're talking about tone in big terms, there are all kinds of things that can feed together into that perception of the tone of a work. And even when we talk about the way an author writes, the tone of an author's work across multiple books, we might say an author's voice is similar throughout their career, but that the tone of an author's early work is a little more somber, and then the tone of an author's more recent work may have lightened up, may have, Comedy's actually harder than drama, folks. Really, really, really. There, again, that theoretical writer's bar. I know there are those of you that would fight me on that, but I gotta tell you, comedy is hard to do. So, a writer who can move into that lightness, a writer that can move into doing funnier stuff, is really accomplishing something as a tonal shift. All right. We are at about the 10-minute mark. Time for my review for this week's Magical Mystery class. I dug into a thriller. I don't read a lot of thrillers. They do tend to give me nightmares. I am somebody who gets over-invested in the world of the story. But I enjoy them once in a while in the way that, it's good to enjoy a deep-fried Twinkie once in a while. So my thriller for the time being, and I'm really glad I invested the time and the emotional energy, is Rachel Howzell Hall's Land of Shadows. It's the first of her Detective Eloise Norton novels, and it was really good. The structure of the book was really great because it was it's a structure I like for crime novels. It's a structure I like for anything, but we have an older case and we have a newer case, and there's some kind of connection, and part of the detective's work is to figure out what that connection is. Is it merely coincidental? Is it substantial? How do those fit together? How, I think it's not a trick I've managed to pull off as a writer. I think it's a really cool plot structure to be able to work back from the past into the present, to have the present reflect back on the past. And I think Rachel Howzell Hall does that beautifully in this novel. It is set in LA. It's a story about the death of a teenage girl. It is a story that brings up an older case of a teen girl's death in a nearby location. One of the things I found interesting, we tend to think, those of us who are not from LA, tend to think of it as a place of sunshine and movie stars, and I really felt like Hall was taking us into the LA where people live, the LA that is not sunshine and movie stars, the LA that is public housing projects, and that is earthquake damage, and that is struggling against gentrification because people will lose their homes. So I really felt like she was doing, I really felt like Hall did a terrific job to give us, to subvert that, again, non-LA reader expectation, and give us a different setting that the book can happen in. Hall herself is a Black writer. Lou Norton, her detective, is a Black female detective in LA's Homicide Division. So it is a book that contains a multitude of characters of color, a book by a writer of color, a fantastic story, all in all, and one that will, I finished it in less than 2 days, and it's a substantial book. So it's also a book that will go by very fast. I highly recommend. So that is it for this episode of Marta's Magical Mystery Class. I encourage you to check out Rachel Howzell Hall's Land of Shadows, and to keep thinking about writing and structure and your manuscript as it evolves. Stay away from the temptation to edit. Just keep going. You're at 35,000 words. and counting, and I believe you can get there. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.